So I'm sitting here getting ready for work in the morning, and I decided to do a little warm reading. And this book has really taken me away, and I'm only on page 7. She starts the book with vignettes: The Warmth of Other Suns, the epic story of America's Great Migration. Now, of course, I was interested in this book because A, my mother had it, so I didn't have to pay for a big hardback. But B, this is my family's story. I thought it was because often heard stories of how my grandparents left after World War II, left Alabama in the cotton fields, and my grandfather was a sharecropper and indentured servant. And I thought that everyone knew this story, but when this book came out a few years ago, and it came out in 2010, and Isabel Wilkerson was on the interview circuit and the book signing tours and all that stuff. She was finding out that the broader America didn't really know about this as a in a sense an era, a period, a movement, a wave of people, and it's shocking to me because it's commonplace for us. I grew up in Kentucky, which is as north of as where my grandparents migrated, along with one of her sisters, another one who eventually migrated down, who had originally landed up in Chicago, a brother. My grandmother's brothers left Alabama to go to two settled in Ohio. One settled in Detroit, a sister settled in Detroit, a sister settled in Chicago, as I mentioned, and then came down to Louisville. Others went out west. Others went up, I'm sure, to New York. You know, Regina King, her grandmother is my grandmother's aunt. I visited her once in Cleveland, and Cleveland, and so there's just many, and there are entire black communities around each of the family members that I just talked about, and their families, just like the family in Good Times. It came up from Georgia, where this woman talks about in part two that it just felt like escaping, and this guy got on the train. And of course, there you see aspects of Jim Crow in here. She doesn't necessarily talk about it, hamper on Jim Crow as an institution yet. I'm only on page 7, but she just talks about how it's enacted in everyone's lives, and it's striking how, you know, a rail. They're at the train station. You have to leave by train, most of them. A railing divided the stairs onto the train. One side of the railing for white passengers, the other for colored, so the soles of their shoes would not touch the same stair. And then she goes on to say, it was a final reminder from the place of his birth of the absurdity of the world he was leaving. And it just reminds me, like in India, with this notion of caste, dividing pure and purity from pollution, pollutedness, the filthiness, the dirt of life, the excrement, death, being polluted, things that untouchables literally touch, to the upper caste, the less polluted, the further away from life's and bodily filth. And it's very much a system of caste that racism has enacted in America, along these lines of purity and pollution. And of course, on page 7, Isabel Wilkerson calls it the caste system. And interestingly, this vignette, the third one, is in relationship to a surgeon, so a middle class professional, skilled professional, whose skills just had no place, as she says. Perhaps he might have stayed had they let him practice surgery like he was trained to do, or let him walk into the palace and try on a suit like anyone else of his stations. The resentments had grown heavy over the years. He knew he was as smart as anybody, and he goes on to say this, and just page after page, you just see this, if not resentment, and she hasn't talked about this resentment in the working class people who've also migrated north, but just the opportunity, the job opportunity, the ability to participate in the market, to put forward one's skills, to get education, training, to do one's best. And the first ones are about, it opens with Mahalia Jackson's "Moving On Up." On our mattress were made of corn shucks and soft gray Spanish moss that hung from the trees. From the swamps we got soup turtles and baby alligators, and from the woods we got raccoon, rabbit, and possum. I just laughed because my grandfather, to the day he, couldn't, hunted possum, raccoon, rabbit, and these are skills. And he fished and squirrel, and these are skills that he brought with him from down south, but from having to scrounge as an indentured servant. And the first story starts with, the family sort of having to hide away the fact that they were leaving, pass out all of their pots and pans and all this stuff on the down low, and get their final money, commission from the season, their payment, because in effect they would always, even if they were getting paid some sum of money, they would owe the farmer their labor for their housing, for the right to to grow vegetables on the little plot of land. Hunting was the only place of freedom. But it just struck me because it's I mean, they're escaping undercover. They had, this one that really got me was the great grandmother who's, had to say goodbye to one after another of her children going north, and so she says this prayer about them as they entered, as which Elizabeth Wilkinson calls the Jim Crow car, the train car. May the Lord be the first one in the car, she prayed, and the last one out. And I just thought about my great-grandmother, Miss Alma Milton, born Alma Kane in 1900 in Elmore County, Alabama, who had 14 children. And as far as I know, all but one left Alabama. Now, she had spent generations accumulating land that my family now is starting to move back to. And so we have houses there, and I'll be going there for Christmas. Right there on the land where my grandmother picked cotton as a kid, and where she, as a kid, resolved to leave that land. Imagine as a kid resolving to have to leave your homeland, that relationship. And that's another thing that got me. This guy is getting on the train, and he says, he gets on, he sits down. He said he turned his face to the north and sat with his back to Florida. Leaving as he did, he figured he would never set foot in Eustis again for as long as he lived. And I just thought, imagine thinking of your place of birth as that disconnected, as that orphaned. And so I'll close this segment with this by referring to a book that takes off from there. Lose Your Mother, a journey along the slave route. And this book came out before The Warmth of Other Suns, but in some ways you can see it as a coming full circle of not just going south, but going deeper than the South, and really exploring our roots, really trying to connect, not with the South per se, but with the sense of homeland, with the sense of connectedness. And certainly our routes through the South are a part of that. So I encourage you to read these books. They're touching. You may see remnants of your own family, of people around you that you know, and you may come to understand the American story more deeply, more fully, from more perspectives than perhaps your own. May verify some of your suspicions, may challenge some of what you thought that you knew. So read and share with a friend. Enjoy.